It's almost like that old saying, like, the biggest thing the devil ever did was fooling us into thinking he doesn't exist.
Insane, uncomfortable, demonic terror.
There's two red lines.
That house was my childhood. And to my family, it was the embodiment of home. You know, just like metaphors always say, a house isn't a home until you make it home. That house was home.
Yeah, no, that house, the vibe was weird. I think sometimes when we walked in, I felt nothing, and then sometimes when we walked in, I felt like a ominous presence. It never felt like a good vibe. I was never comfortable in the house after it was empty. When Bean and everyone lived there, it was always a very inviting, warm house, but it was kind of spooky just because it was old and all the stories. But I didn't like it.
You know, I grew up with a very Italian cultural family, so when it comes to ghosts and stuff like that, it wasn't if they're real, it was just simply put, they are real.
Always when you're going into a house that has some sort of demonic activity happen, there's always a sense of uneasiness. You know, you can never tell what you're going to be prepared for because demons are super unpredictable. There was definitely a feeling of uneasiness, and that is the main reason why we prayed at the beginning of all our investigations.
It probably boosted my belief, I'd say, in the paranormal for sure. I've always believed in it, but from that house, there's just nothing that can break that belief now, is I'll always believe in that type of stuff.
7900 was not just a house. It was not just the party place for the family. 7900 was the best kept secret paranormally that I believe the world's ever seen. I have entered countless locations. I have been to multiple haunted hotels, auditoriums, high schools, abandoned buildings. I've been to all these places, but there is not a damn place on earth that I have ever been that even comes remotely close to the absolute terror that I felt from a house that I grew up in. It was not this big shock that that house was haunted. My family built the house in 1918. They bought the land. It was right next to the railroad track. And then slowly, over time, other houses were built around that neighborhood, also for my family. And it's really cool to look back because we do have photos that document the house being built and the progress and the different shapes and sizes it took until it ultimately became how it looked when it was torn down. And you see, it started out innocent. And then the first EVP happened. My grandma was walking around, and it was the upstairs area, I believe. She went upstairs to film just how dirty it had become. Our cousin at the time was living with my great-great-grandma, who was alive at the time and lived in the house. And he kind of trashed it. It looked like a mess. It was clothing everywhere. My great-great-grandma wasn't talking. Yet in this video, you can hear this bombardment of angry voices. I remember the first time I heard it, and I was like, no way. That's not real. There's no way that's real. And so she sent it to me. I was like, you know what, yeah. I'm gonna take this, and I'm gonna prove to you why it's not real. So I put it on my computer, I listened to it in every single way I could. I didn't even know anything about audio manipulation at the time, but there's no way that was faked. So me and Matthew went to investigate, and we went 2 or 3 times for the first investigations. And we didn't really catch anything. I used the spirit box, and I mean, random voices, nothing of significance.
The very first time we went into the house, I actually had no idea what to expect because I had heard all these stories from JT, and I can, you know, I'm a believer. I've never doubt anything until I know it can be disproved. But he told me all these super crazy stories, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit skeptical until we actually saw what was in there.
Yeah, we took pictures, and 2 significant things we got in the pictures were a full-body apparition that was standing in a doorway, and then in the basement there was like this floating baby head. But in that baby head picture, I was never able to tell. There's this thing above it. It looks like a demon. That orb of the floating baby head, that will always look weird to me. But it was that first thing I said, the full body apparition in the doorway. That is kind of what made me start to realize, okay, there's something weird with this house. There's something not right. Because I took a photo, and it was just this apparition in a doorway. Or rather, Matthew took a photo, and it was just this apparition in a doorway. And then all of a sudden, people start telling me that it looks like my great-great-granddad. Little to my knowledge, he had actually died in the house in the 80s. That was about 10 years before I was even born. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. I was like, okay, cool, that's weird that I would catch his ghost, but okay. I was more focused on why did I actually catch a ghost in this house.
The house growing up was full of energy. It was happy. It was like joyous, boisterous. There was always noise. It always felt warm. After Ruby died, it was a whole different energy. It's almost like those memories never happened at all. That's part of, I think, the static I'm talking about in my brain. It's almost like my brain was trying to reconcile what was with what currently was happening, the past with what was going on, and there was no recognition. It wasn't even remotely the same. Yeah, it was like a shell, but of negativity. It's almost like it was like an exterior of what I remembered, because the house looked the same from the outside. But when you walked in, it was a different kind of emptiness, like a darkness, I guess, an isolation. I don't like that feeling. You can feel isolated in a room full of people. You can feel alone in a room full of people. That's a different kind of loneliness. That's how it felt.
It was disabling. It was very overwhelming. It felt so uncomfortable. And you see, at the time that first EVP was caught, we had stopped having family parties there. And it had been a couple years. And the thing about that is, I've always theorized that there was so much social activity at that house that no one probably remembered all the paranormal stuff. They probably didn't even, have any sort of stories. because they didn't pay attention. But they probably happened all the time, and it was never probably acknowledged. So with all those years of abandonment, I'm guessing something pissed those spirits off. Or maybe not pissed them off, but maybe once I kept going back, it's whatever was there started realizing I'm all it's got. Matthew is all it's got. All the investigators that ever walked into that building, that's all who they're ever gonna see anymore. And it's weird how the life of the party, so to speak, went from the living to the dead. While these investigations were happening, I was using different pieces of equipment, I was trying to be the tough guy. I was trying to be like Zach Bagans. Confrontational, not taking any sort of negativity from the spirits. It got out of hand pretty fast. I'll keep asking these spirits, hey, what's your name? Just basic ghost hunter questions, ghost hunting 101. And I remember there was one particular instant where it was me alone with a spirit box, and at this point, the house was on the market to be getting sold. And I kind of took it as my personal obligation that, hey, I'm a ghost hunter, I should probably try and get rid of what's ever here, that way whatever is here can properly rest, and that way whoever, gets this property next doesn't have to deal with disturbed spirits. And so I remember I was trying to tell this spirit, why are you stuck in this house? Come on. Everyone else has moved on, why haven't you? And it told me I cannot. And then a female voice comes through and says, you can. And then I ask again, I say, did you just say I cannot? Clear as day. It comes through and it says yes. Stuck in this house, you can talk. Everybody else has passed on. How can you stay? Where do you want after me? Did you say I cannot? The spirits that were there knew me. And they let me know that. And probably the most disturbing, oh man, I get chills every time I talk about this. This is like one of the weirdest stories. This was the moment in my life. Like, we all have those moments as paranormal investigators where, like, yeah, there's no way this isn't real. We all have moments of, oh, that's cool, oh, that's a norm, oh, that's a weird voice, This was a moment that struck the absolute fear of God in me. Because I knew there was no way that anything else in that house could have done what I witnessed. I had a ghost meter, and then I also had a DVD camcorder, and that's a camcorder that has those little mini DVD discs that you can record directly onto. So I'm walking around the house in pure silence, because this is when the house started getting very, very negative. And I remember I sat down in the kitchen. The way the kitchen worked, there was kind of two sections. If you walk through the front door to the left, there was like this dining table, but that wasn't a dining room. It was a table, and then there were chairs around it. And then on the right was the actual kitchen, the side with the sink, the stove, the microwave, the fridge, and etc. And so I walk in, and I'm facing the side. I'm looking towards the stove, and I'm on the side with all the tables, so the front door is like between us. So I'm sitting at the table and I'm going through the footage, and there's no audio on this footage. So the only thing I actually hear in this disturbing silence is just the disc slowly playing, and it's the slightest hum. It's almost like HVAC. It was so quiet. Plain as day, I remember sitting in that chair, watching that footage, and I hear something say my name as loud as I'm talking to you right now. I was 13. And then the events that happened next, the best metaphor I've found to describe it, I was frozen with fear, but I knew I was going to leave that house now. So I remember I got up and I tried running out of the house, but I don't know what it was. It felt like I was running through water. I felt like I was being slowed down, like I was being pulled back, and all I know is look at the front door. Just look at the front door, get out of there. And I don't know why hearing it say my name triggered this hostile, disturbed, uncomfortable feeling for me. It didn't feel right.
When something singles you out and it communicates in a way like saying your name, like I think that takes it to a whole other level. Almost like you're a target.
That was the moment in my life I was like, it's real. It does not matter what TV fakes, it's real. And it's with us every day.
It got pretty scary at times. I remember when the red Rover came through the spirit box, and I think it spooked me the most because we were saying it in the house previously, so it's almost like it remembered and it wanted us to know. Like that was, if it was gonna send a message, a personalized message, that was it to me, because I was saying it almost in a joking manner. And I think I was even saying it on a prior time we were there, and then it came through the spirit box, and I'm like, okay, it's not like that's a common phrase, red Rover, send whatever right over. So when that came through, I was just like targeted again, like, or almost like, hey, we want you to know, like, yes, we know the difference between people who come in. We know it's you.
I'm not sure. That's when all of them stopped scaring me.
Red Rover, send something on over.
Okay, you can do that, but I'm not gonna let you. Red Rovers! After that, me and Matthew continued to investigate, and along that line, we also brought Mark on board, and he started to investigate the house with us.
I wasn't so much scared to step in, but with what was in there, it wasn't necessarily nice, so it always felt unwelcoming most of the time, and that, you know, it makes us want to go there. As in me, Matt, and JT, obviously, you know, that's what makes us want to go there, is that it's unwelcoming, so.
Once we started bringing on all these people, then people started telling me weird things. Mark in particular would always talk about the dreams he had had. Matthew would always talk about how he doesn't like the house, how he doesn't like the feeling. One time, it even manipulated his phone to, it glitched out the camera and it turned purple. That was a very weird piece of evidence that had happened.
What the hell?
JT? What did you do to my phone?
My
phone!
This is not right.
What is going on? My camera!
Are you doing this?
Pissed. You know we're gonna leave?
All of a sudden, we started capturing this incredible pieces of evidence. We caught this insane shadow figure that darted across the room when it was just me and Matthew. And the audio is always my go-to for when it's played, because that house was so old. If you leaned on one of your feet, you would have heard it. There's no way Matthew or I could have made that shadow.
We were doing an EVP session upstairs. There was a hollow wall right next to us, and out of nowhere we heard 3 loud consecutive bangs.
We were trying to communicate, and there was broken glass on the floor, and I was trying to figure out what the hell was going on.
A couple of times it was too much and I wanted to get out of there, but I didn't feel spiritually safe at all. I felt foggy. My brain felt foggy. That's one of the times where I was like, we need to leave now. That was forceful.
It shook the house, and it freaked me out. I was like, oh God, I need to get the hell out of here.
A lot of times your mind goes to a place where you're trying to explain things away. You couldn't explain that away.
Being that was right next to us, we followed our gut instincts and got the hell out of that house as soon as possible.
It's funny talking about these things because I see them in my mind, and I'm reliving it, and it brings me peace knowing I'll never have to deal with that kind of terror again, but at the same time I'm remembering how scared I actually was in those moments.
It was very active. Even when I almost felt like kind of like a white noise always going on in my head whenever we were in there. And I remember feeling lightheaded a lot when we were upstairs. It's just a weird, almost like static white noise is how I would explain it. Like confusion. Like my brain was slightly in a fog anytime we were in there, and it kind of spooked me out.
There was one investigation in particular where I always like to think about it as the omen. We would go to the house by ourselves, but because it was abandoned and we had a track record of criminal family members, we always had to kind of, clear the house. We always had this ritual of wearing rosaries. We always believed that rosaries were going to protect us, that was God's way of protecting us, and that we were never going to be in danger as long as we wore a rosary. Then we also started getting into the habit of, there was this cross that was on a wedding picture. We would kneel and we would sing Our Father before every investigation. This one time in particular, my rosary fell off my neck. And then I thought that was really weird because it happened right after the prayer. We went upstairs to clear that, and then Matthew's broke.
The moment the rosary fell off my neck, I instantly knew that we were dealing with something that I couldn't quite understand myself, because that was a rosary I had blessed by my priest too, so I had never realized that we could come across such evil forces as that. To be honest, I kind of wanted to investigate a little bit more to see if the rosary's breaking actually did put us in a little bit more danger.
We went through the entire investigation that time, and it was nothing significant other than the rosaries. But then it really becomes significant when you realize every rosary that entered the house after that broke. My aunt had a rosary that she had often worn, and it broke when she was upstairs.
Yeah, it's like an in-your-face taunting almost, because that's like religious stuff, taunting of your beliefs, not only your physical health, but of your whole belief structure. I didn't like it because we were in there, I don't know, under the guise of protection from God. Maybe that was perceived as being hostile. I don't know.
When the rosary started getting broken, I recognized that I should probably stop. That was the first time I had thought to myself, I need to stop coming to this house, and I need to stop messing with the spirits on the inside, because this is dangerous. This is getting to a point where I need to stop. I eventually talked myself out of that. I was like, you know what, no, I'm gonna keep going, and I'm gonna just let this happen. I wanna see where this ends up. I wanna see this through. The night the rosary from Rome broke, me and Matthew always referred to that as the night of intensity. Because that investigation was just the entire night I felt so uncomfortable. This place that I looked at is, my childhood home, where I grew up. It didn't feel the same. It felt disturbing. I've always heard sayings that when there's a very powerful spiritual place, that just the sight of it will give you chills. Just thinking about that night gives me chills. And I remember looking at the house, and I remember thinking, I don't want to do this. I remember thinking, I do not want to do this. I don't want to go in there. I don't care what needs to be said. I don't care who has something to say. I don't want to go. The night of intensity started off just uncomfortable. Previous investigations, we had caught, great spirit box voices and direct interactions, and hell, I even had people who were just, even by the minor things, scared, like just hearing voices through the spirit box, but nothing could have ever prepared us for what we were walking into. We walked in, and immediately, like I said, it felt scary. It felt uncomfortable. There was this sense of terror, like I wasn't allowed to leave. I saw the front door. I knew I could walk out, but I was convinced I couldn't leave. And so we started investigating, and I remember I go and I set up the fork, and nothing came of that for the first try. And then me and Matthew decided, let's go upstairs. So we bought a teddy bear as a trigger object. So we go upstairs, I'm sitting, and the second we go upstairs, intensity began. So I sat next to the teddy bear. All of a sudden my back starts to burn. Really, really bad. There was something about that. It was like someone was branding me.
The moment of realization when I looked on JT's back and saw the 3 red marks running clearly down it is when I realized these guys aren't playing. Like, we're actually dealing with some serious stuff here. Everything started going through my mind of, this is just like the TV show, this is just like the horror movies. I lifted up his shirt, pointed my flashlight at his back, and lo and behold, 3 red marks running down his back, and my heart just fell to my stomach, realizing that, wow, we're actually dealing with powerful forces here.
There's 2 of them. Seriously? There's two red lines. What the? Yeah, get it on camera.
And it just was the most violating, painful feeling I could ever describe. And so I finally, Matthew, in his realization, tells me to move, and so I move, and and he wants to see my back, and I'm like, what do I do? I'm in a state of shock. This is not okay. It wasn't until later that I looked at it, and I was like, Matthew, why does it look like there's blood coming out of the wall? And then I realized it wasn't just that spot. It was the whole damn wall. And then slowly over time, you see this evolution of this black line that just appeared at the same level throughout the entire upstairs area. And I looked behind it once, and I recall seeing that there was no mold, there's no pipes, there's nothing. There was this black line that just started coming out of the wall. Throughout that night, after I was scratched, we actually ended up thinking, okay, let's leave downstairs. Let's just go downstairs. Downstairs is not bad, right? But the story behind the fork, and why I decided randomly, I'm going to test this. My grandma told me when she was a kid, she was sitting in the kitchen, and that she was being disrespectful to her aunt. And the aunt's name was Mina, and she was being disrespectful to her aunt. the aunt warned her, hey, you better stop being rude, because our ancestors will get you if you're being mean. She didn't listen. So a fork flew off the counter, and it went right towards the side door. And my grandmother swears to this day that there's no way her aunt could have moved it. So I was going to try it. I was going to say, all right, move a fork. And again, this is when I was feeling pretty ballsy, and when, for some reason, I was like, I don't know why I want to see this, but I want to see this. Is this real? So I'm holding the camera with my right hand, and I'm leaning onto the counter. At this point, I don't think it's going to go. At this point, I'm convinced I'm wasting my time, and I should probably just leave the house, because you want to leave anyway. But why not try? So I just kind of got bored with it, and I just started looking around, and Matthew starts talking about knocks he's hearing. And then all of a sudden, I hear a clink, and I look, and the fork is in front of me, and it drops. Because my hand's starting to hurt.
I just heard 3 quick smart knocks. Couldn't tell what it was. They were in rapid succession like this.
That's fucking weird.
I just heard that. Did you not hear it?
No. Are you fucking kidding me?
What did you just do?
I tested it because I wanted to see if it would happen, but I was not ready. I was convinced it would never happen. I still get freaked out, and then the EVP that we caught before it, where it says, throw it at him. The Adam Intensity had so many moments of just negative, aggressive, paranormal encounters. After the fork was flung, we went across the street to my grandmother's house. At that point, I was done. I was convinced I'm done. I don't want to see anything else this house has to offer. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to leave without anything under surveillance. So I left the camera rolling, and in this EVP, you can hear it. There's 27 minutes. No one was in the house. It was 11:30 at night. No one was near the house. I don't know who these spirits are, but we heard them that night. If me hearing my name in that house was validation that that the paranormal is real, then this was validation that this house is haunted, because we just heard loudly, plain as day, that these ghosts are real. And so Matthew and I are unaware that this incredible EVP was just captured. And then we go downstairs, and we don't catch anything. We don't even show that part in the investigation that we put out. But then we go into what is the dining room. There's a couch in there. It's also the living room, I guess. We go in there, and we start a spirit box session. And at this point, I'm checked out. I'm done. I don't want to be in there at all. I'm just trying to, I'm actually filming this with my eyes closed. That's how terrified I was at that moment. I had my flash on, I'm using my cell phone. Our cameras were dead. Everything was drained. I was drained. I was petrified of being near that building, let alone back inside of it. You know, we don't really catch much on the spirit box. So after about 10 minutes, I'm done. Matthew is done, and so I start packing up. And that's when it decided to get us one more time. This whole night, I've been wearing the rosary from Rome. And this rosary, at the time, I went to Sunday school. And my teacher went to Rome and had Mass with the Pope. And so she brought back all these rosaries that were blessed by the Pope. So I always look at that as that's my main rosary, you know? It's a rosary blessed by the Pope, why shouldn't it be? That should be the most holy thing I own.
After the night of intensity, I'm not sure if it was just me being exhausted or the spirits didn't want me to remember anything, but I don't really remember much. When we walked in on the night of intensity, I had no clue what we were in for. I had no clue that we were gonna catch a fork that almost tried to stab one of us. The multiple times JT was scratched in that night, so I don't think we had any clue what we were in for. And to top it all off, at the end of the investigation, we were sitting in the dining room, and all of a sudden, the door next to us just starts creaking open, and that's when we get the hell out of the house for a little bit.
I'll never forget, I had this old photographer case that I put all my equipment in. And I always lined it up right in front of the snack table. And I was cleaning it up. And I look up. And the damn door that opens to the side where the playground was, the door in the kitchen starts to open. I don't know what had happened. That door, in the footage that you saw from the 33 Second Long EVP, that door had a jam under it. I have no recollection at what point it moved. Matthew didn't move it, I didn't move it. But at some point in that night, that door jam had moved and set itself next to the door. And sure enough, I looked down, because I'm putting the case right next. The case is right next to the door on the snack or by the snack table. I look up and the door, I see the handle turn, and I know nothing good is about to come of this. I'm okay with the door opening. I've had it happen to me before. I don't know what it was about this instinct in particular, but it struck me with this fight or flight fear that I needed to run. But something said, you need to get the hell out of this house. We're catching our breath, and then I realize our stuff's still in there. So we go in, and as if it was taunting me, I opened the front door, and on the floor, in a perfect circle, is the rosary from Rome, cut at one end. This rosary had a metal chain. There is no way that rosary should have ever broke. Yet it was left at the front door, as if it was telling me, yeah, we got you.
I think the rosary stuff, anything with the spirituality, and I think just the feeling, it just felt dark and heavy. It always felt heavy. It wasn't like something needed your help. It's like something wanted you in there. But it's like it didn't want you in there because it needed help. It needed release. It wanted you in there for a whole other purpose is what it felt like to me.
We took a little break from that house. We actually didn't, bother going back. But I went back after 2 weeks, and I finally broke, and I was like, I need to go to the house. You know, the day's coming soon where I'm not going to be allowed to ever walk back in those doors again. I need to get closure. I need to say goodbye. I need to cleanse whatever's there. I cannot leave whatever's there.
Sometimes I think closure is a tool. It entices people to keep coming back to a situation looking for something there is no resolution there. That's part of the thing I think scared me too. It's like you were looking for a closure that you were never going to find, but it's because the house was drawing you. It was almost like a sense of madness. I don't think it wanted to go down because I think it wanted a place to draw people. And sometimes, I remember one time thinking about the Rosary. I forgot about this until now, but when it first happened with me, I for some reason, I had a thought in my head that was like, this is a warning. So I think they wanted us to be in there longer. The longer we were in there, the more susceptible we were. And so I don't think they were doing necessarily the overtly attention-getting things. I almost think those were warnings from the other energies in the house, like, you need to leave before this gets out of control. It's almost like that old saying, like, the biggest thing the devil ever did was fooling us into thinking he doesn't exist. It's like that house just wanted people in it.
When I had learned that house was going to be taken by another building, I immediately thought, oh no, those people are not going to have good time sleeping at night.
I think about that time in my life, and I always kind of laugh because I'm like, oh, I was obsessed with the house. Even though in hindsight, I don't think I was obsessed with the house. I think I was taken over by something in it.
With that being his grandma's house and stuff like that, I don't think that's it exactly, just it being his grandma's house. There's something in there that maybe pulled him closer, you know.
And for months, hell, years, it did not get better. And finally the house was sold, it was fenced off, and I drove by it every day, and I was waiting for the day they were going to tear it down. I wanted to see it torn down. I wanted to see that. I was hoping that would be some sort of release, but it just never came. They never got to tearing it down, and then finally I snapped and I told Mark and Matthew, I was like, look, I know I can't go in anymore. I don't like when people break into buildings, but this instinct for me in particular, this was my childhood home. I needed to get rid of whatever the hell was there. I needed one last investigation, so we went one last time.
When Mark, JT, and I all hopped the fence when it was pitch black out and our feet landed on the fresh snow, I could only think, we're gonna be in for it for sure.
I'll never forget how much my breath was taken away when I walked through that front door. I was stunned. It was all gone. Everything that I had ever associated with that house, I was walking into its shell. Everything else was just gone. And it sucked. I made it a point, though, I went to every room of the house, and I took a photo of every room. And I remember I didn't like it. It felt worse than before. It felt significantly worse than before.
It almost like halted you at the door, because it was like 3 in the morning, very early in the morning that we broke in, and it was different. You know, it had a different feel to it, not like it usually did. Maybe because it was the last time we'd be there. Yeah, it was different. It was a lot different.
There were multiple significant things that happened to Mark and I while we were making our rounds to the house. One being that while I was standing not right next to Mark, I was standing next to him and something touched him. He asked if it was me, I said no, and then that's when we realized we were not alone. Another significant thing, 3 knocks, the wire movement, the mist that made the wire move, pretty major stuff we caught that night.
Alright, cool. night. Make yourself known.
Do you just touch me?
No,
You did not touch me.
I swear to God.
The fuck, dude?
I swear to Christ, I did not touch you.
What the fuck?
You're upstairs at this house. Please speak into the red knight. Make yourself known. There you go. There you go. Is that you? Is that you? Is that you?
I felt that the way the state the house was in, I felt like it was a natural state. Like that was the state it was supposed to be in. I don't know why. It just felt like to me such an old house shouldn't look any other way. That was definitely a night of one of the most successful investigations we've ever had.
A lot was caught. A lot of orbs, a lot of stuff moving down in the basement mostly. And for surely the little girl we caught on camera was for surely the biggest one.
I'll never forget the thing that happened that caused it all to end. In the actual investigation, I radio into Mark and Matthew and I tell them, guys, get out now. We weren't supposed to be there. We broke in. That what happened next. See, at the time, no one was in the house. It was fenced off. No one was allowed to be in the house. And then, me and Mark heard footsteps in the snow.
We heard footsteps behind us. You know, we heard there's almost somebody chasing us. So, yeah, that was different.
Something was running towards us, and we left. And we never went back. That was the last investigation we had ever had at that house.
It was different. It was really weird. It was a bummer because when JT told me that it was getting, you know, bulldozed, it was very sad. It was kind of a sad reaction to it.
The day the house was torn down, I was on my way to work. I was going over the bridge that the train I take goes on, and I looked to my right. That's all it takes to see piles and piles of rubble. And that's when I knew I had to give JT a call immediately, and that's exactly what I did.
He calls me. He says, "You need to go to the house." And I sat there and I watched him finish, and eventually everyone drove away. And I stood there in awe. It was weird walking onto that demolished lot, standing in a field where I had had so much joy as a child that it wasn't real to me.
I think I was in shock a little bit, in disbelief, and I think I felt, not that it was anticlimactic, but it was almost a sad kind of, because I guess I was just expecting more family, more like rallying around it, or more just interaction, like maybe we'd all be there. It was almost uneventful, and that was sad.
My reaction to the piles of rubble that I saw was they finally did it. I'll be honest, I didn't think I was gonna see the day, or even close to the day where the house was gonna be torn down, but it just kind of caught me off guard because I thought we were gonna get to do at least a couple more investigations in that house, knowing JT.
I was walking on bits of old beds, on windows, on pieces of carpet. It was really sad seeing the house torn down.
Oh, there's a piece of our history, our childhood, just gone, and nobody even knew it was happening. How sad. It's just almost sad. It's like we all knew it was coming, but it's almost like when a family member dies, you kind of know it's coming sometimes, like if somebody's sick, but when it actually happens, you're not prepared. And it's never what you thought it was going to be. You don't feel the way you thought you were going to feel. It's almost like you have memories, but part of your memory dies that day. Part of you dies that day. It's not a question of whether or not it exists. It's a question of whether or not you choose to believe it. Your belief doesn't make it real or not.
So finally, after the house was torn down, I really started to digging. I was like, what is so significant about this house that it was so haunted, that it was so, evil in a sense, that it felt the need to take a hold of me and make me become obsessed with it.
I remember as a little kid, they were messing around with me and Jake, and they were always like taunting us and scaring us and whatever, so they left us downstairs and told us a scary story or something, and then Josh ran upstairs. So then we ran upstairs to follow him, and maybe 2 minutes later, it wasn't like immediate, it wasn't like this balloon got caught up in the breeze from us running up the stairs. It was like 2 minutes later, this red balloon, and it came from downstairs. It didn't run into any walls, it just came up. And we look over and we see at the top of the stairwell, this balloon's just floating there. And that, we were freaked out. All of us were freaked out. We ran outside. I don't think there were any adults in the house. I think they were all at work. They all had cleaning jobs, so they were always gone at night. So it was like dusk, and we ran outside. We didn't want to go back inside until anyone got home from work.
Then I started walking around and talking to family members, and I finally started hearing stories that were never told before. And all of a sudden, these pieces started coming together, and they started building this picture, and all of a sudden, everything started to make sense.
A lot that went on there, a lot of history that JT has given me, and crazy things have happened there every time I've stepped foot on that house. The house was extremely active with demons, probably, of course, actually. Yeah, not probably, of course. There was probably a lot of stuff in there that wasn't demons too.
So I remember as a child, like a 7 or 8 year old child, this grown woman who I loved and respected, when Vina would sleep, she was big on the witching hour, so she would say, from midnight to 1, she firmly believed that the dead were walking, to the point where she wouldn't leave the bed. So that definitely did something to me as a kid. I'm like, if this adult is scared to go and use the restroom and is peeing in a coffee can in her room, something must be out there. And I think that's affected me my entire life. I think when you close your mind off to stuff like that, then it stops manifesting.
There was infant mortality in the house. I do believe at least 2 babies were dead. 1 boy and 1 girl. One of them only made it to 1 year old. But they did die in the house. And I do believe that after that, it was just like an occasional family member. There were always rumors that the house was a butcher shop or a funeral home, but there's never been actual documentation of that. There's a lot of the actual documentation that we were able to find was that the house was actually just a plot of land that a former Civil War soldier owned.
And I'm not even sure all of the energy was human. So Sue told me like lots of times, and I think as children they thought it was a joke. They didn't realize. So there were lots of windows into the cellar, and they said on multiple occasions they would go down and just knock, and the scarecrow would come up. And then they'd go to another window and they'd knock, and no matter, like, all the time, didn't matter what time of day it was, the scarecrow would produce in the windows. Well, one time they did it, but no one was there. I think they always thought it was Poppy playing a trick on them. But one time when they did it, there was nobody in the house. Poppy and Vina were cleaning and Ruby was not there. And so they knock on the window, and I don't think they were expecting to see the scarecrow, and when they did, I think it really freaked them out. Because they're like, okay, so what's going on here? And that's part of the reason I hated that basement. I hated that cellar because I was like, well, there's something down there. It almost makes me think of one of the stories Sue told me about the other house, Sylvia's house, when she saw that electricity running back and forth along the wall. It's when they were kids in their bedroom. And so when I saw the black lines, that's what it made me think of. I'm like, what if it was electricity or some sort of energy? What if it was a different kind of energy? Yeah, that's one of the stories that really spooked me out. And so they told us all these stories as little kids, and then growing up in that house, you would go into that room and there you could still see the residue from the sockets. Even though they would wipe it off the wall, it would always come back. Yeah, I'm like, that's weird. I didn't know how, you don't know how to think. You don't know what to think of it. It gives me goosebumps talking about it. In the stories when we were kids, we would beg them to tell us the stories. But then you can't sleep at night sometimes because of it. So I just know that Sue, I don't even know if she got a book from the library or where she got it. I think she said from the school library. And she was conjuring up black magic, but she didn't really know what she was doing. She thinks that she opened a portal and she didn't know how to close it. And so all these things were happening consequently, a lot of them in Sylvia's house. And they told me several stories. And I don't know if she ever tried to close it or what, but I think that energy kind of followed her everywhere. Because I think not only does energy attach itself to locations, it attaches itself to people.
She had done witchcraft on that property. And like bees to a hive, negative follows negative, they all ended up in that house. And I do believe that for years is what I dealt with.
Like, I would go to sleepovers and I'd have all these weird fears where other kids would be scared of, like, actual things, like physical things, like a murderer breaking in or something like that, or I was always scared of the things you couldn't see. And I thought that was normal until the more you get exposed to other families, that's not normal. Most people don't think that's normal. Most people don't grow up hearing these crazy stories as children, like ingrained as children. Like, that has to affect your outlook on life to the point where, like, I don't even like to look in mirrors because I'm expecting something, waiting for the day when I'm going to see something behind me. And I don't think that's normal. I don't think everyone thinks that way.
And finally, after all that being said and done, I realized what I needed to do. On the anniversary of the house being torn down, I needed to go, and I needed to burn sage. Sage is the only way I knew of cleansing something and getting rid of spirits, and it's hard to do in something that doesn't exist anymore, because you're supposed to do it in doorways, windows, and dark places. And that's impossible to do when it's an empty field.
We burn sage to try and make peace with the spirits that we may have otherwise disturbed by having unwanted conversations with. Also to try and make sure all the spirits were at peace over there.
So I go with my knowledge and I decide before I sage, I want to use my information. We heard babies crying. We heard a train horn. When it was a light rail. And it wasn't digital, it was a hard train horn. It is getting colder as we get over here. That was a train horn. And then we kept hearing this weird, what sounded like a chainsaw noise. It made no sense. None of it did. If I'm being honest, I don't know what it was, but it felt gone. Truthfully, it did. It felt like I was relieved of this horrible thing that I had had with me for years, and I don't know for sure, but I can say that night, it feels empty.
I can genuinely say the smell was nicer. I think spirits are capable of listening and understanding us to a certain extent. So I think they were able to realize that we were delving in deeper to the history of the house and trying to understand their time. So talking about the history of the house, I think it did make it more direct, yes. After we had finished burning sage, there was a noticeable calm feeling in the air. I'm not sure if that was just my gut instinct, but I'm pretty sure JT felt it too.
And it both brings me to peace and at the same time disturbs me. Because a place that used to feel so crowded even though no one was there, feeling so open, it's different. And it took a little bit for me to get used to that.
There is zero doubt in my mind that that house is haunted with the things that have happened to JT and me, and that house is unconditionally paranormal. And I'm just glad I was around to experience it with JT and Mark the way I did, and I'm glad we were able to somewhat effectively commune with the spirits there.
I think some people are more susceptible because I think some of us are willing to hear things. I think because we reach out to the afterlife and to the spirit world, I think sometimes it reaches back.
7900 was one of the most paranormally active houses I had ever investigated.
Everything is gone. No one has nightmares anymore. I don't have the obsession anymore. I've washed my hands of it, so to speak. The house was terrifying. The house was haunted. And a lot of people have a lot of good memories in that house, myself included. I'll always be thankful that I had that experience in my life. And I'm glad I got to document it.